There are few legacies like that of Mikhail Khergiani. Stories claim he could hang on a rock ledge with only a single finger for over a week, never making a sound. He is considered the greatest alpinist of his time, depending on who you ask, of course. It is impossible to deny his impact on the mountaineering world. I mean, he has his own statue, a song dedicated to his memory, and even a planet named after him. The Queen of England, Elizabeth II, would watch the Gergian in action at a competition in Wales and be so impressed that he was dubbed the name Tiger of the Rocks. Climbing was in Mikhail's DNA. He was born to be an alpinist, until one fateful day on July 4th, 1969. He was climbing Su Alto, Dolomites in Italy, when a sudden rockfall struck him directly in the chest. This is his story. Mikhail stood at the base of Mount Ushba, closely analyzing their route and replaying every technical move in his head. He aimed to be careful but successful, as his team was counting on him. I mean, they picked him for a reason. He was the best of the best, and nobody compared to his skills. He stood with confidence as they waited for him to start. He took a deep breath, nodded to his companions, put his foot on the rock, and started to climb. Mount Ushba was certainly not the tallest in elevation. Its south peak stands at 4,710 meters or 15,453 feet, and the north peak at 4,690 meters. But it is considered the most difficult summit in the Caucasus Range. It consists of steep granite, ice, and mixed terrain. Loose snow builds on the mountain's features, making the route prone to avalanches. Detailed information on the peak is limited, as it is very remote, only accessible by foot, and the stories that are known are filled with accidents or, in most cases, fatalities. The Svan, or people native to the mountainous region of Savanti, associate Ushba with mystic legends that refer to the mountain as a dangerous place. Mikhail had a deep respect for the mountains and understood the risks that he was taking. The team made good progress as they climbed the North Peak's eastern wall, a 1,300 meter high traverse that is accessed by first climbing the Kaladia Glacier. They would rest right under a section named the Mirror, which to this point had never been climbed before. The vertical section of the rock is the most remote and hardest traverse of their climb, but must be completed if they were to reach the summit. Mikhail looked upwards, carefully analyzing and preparing how he would tackle the overhanging section. His comrades were completely depending on him to set and establish the route. Snow had made the rock damp, and from below he could not spot many holds, but it would not be long before Mikhail set off, his only protection a poor belay down below with his team. Within a few minutes, he was at the overhang. He reached up and began to pull himself further and further until he realized there was no hold left for him to continue. Maybe for the first time, Mikhail felt nervous. The retreat was impossible given his position, and he began to understand the gravity of his actions. He shouted down to his friends to untie his rope, but they certainly would not abandon their leader. No. Instead, Mikhail closed his eyes and began hearing Georgian folk songs being loudly chanted in the wind. He felt invigorated, completely inspired as he was focused and began to slowly climb upwards, inch by inch, rock by rock, until eventually it was done. He had reached the top. Mikhail was born in 1932 in a small town of Mestia, Georgia. He was a climber from the moment he took his first steps. His grandfather was Anton Khergiani, who participated in climbing rescues, and his father, Vessorian Khergiani, was a well-known alpinist. Mikhail's father understood the risk of mountaineering and would try to prevent his son from the sport, but would soon be forced to accept his passion. From childhood, he was distinguished by his composure, self-esteem, and hard work, all characteristics of mountaineers. He was deeply convinced that all glory and success can only be achieved through hard work. At age 14 in 1946, Mikhail would secretly follow a mass ascent in Savanti that his father was a part of. He hid behind bushes, watching the men from afar until the sun was setting and base camp had been established. Mikhail approached the men that night, convinced that his father would have to accept him, as it was too far to turn back alone. With the support of the other men, eventually his father would agree, and the 14-year-old made his first ascent. From this accomplishment, he would receive a USSR climbing badge, and this would just be the start of a legendary career. In 1951, he would go on to attend and graduate from the Soviet School of Mountaineering Instructors. It was here that he received his legal name, Mikhail, as the Russian professors were unable to pronounce his birth name. The name Mikhail would be written on his passport and never changed, but it was also at this school where his skills began to be noticed, and he started to be more involved with the community. In 1952, Mikhail shared the title of USSR climbing champion in Yalta with Mikhail Khergiani. In 1956, he was named the champion of the USSR for the first ascent of the northern face of the Tayatabashi. In 1957, he placed third place at the USSR championship for the first ascent of the northwestern face of Dongus Orhan. In 1958, he became friends with John Hunt, the leader of the 1953 Everest expedition, who quickly noticed Mikhail's skill and ferocity when climbing. His impact began to spread into Western Europe, and in 1960 he traveled to England, where he received the nickname Tiger of the Rocks from Queen Elizabeth II. In 1963, Mikhail would be named Honorary Master of Sports for the USSR. In 1964, he was named Champion of the USSR again for his climb of Ushpa. In 1965, the world recognized him as one of the best mountain climbers in history. He would then go on to be named Champion of the USSR yet again and win a gold medal. In 1966, he would receive the Badge of Honor for outstanding sporting achievements. Finally, in 1967, Mikhail was named the International Master of Sports and an honored coach of the Georgian SSR. From 1960 to 1967, he never lost a climbing championship and received numerous international awards. Every autumn after the climbing season ended, Mikhail would return home by hiking through the pass of Savante to his father's house. As soon as he walked inside, he placed all his medals for the year on the table, looked at his dad, and said, "This is for you. You made me like this. This is all yours." He was beloved by the former Soviet Union, and without a doubt, the most popular sportsman during his time. His reach would expand globally, as magazines and newspapers published reports of his climbs with catchy headlines. Mikhail was not a man of many possessions, and coming from a small country, had some trouble being integrated into society. However, his fame and skills earned him a spot as an honorary representative of the USSR, a well-deserved title, and the world recognized him for having an amazing spirit. When asked what Mikhail's favorite thing to do was, he would go on to state, "No matter how many medals I have, I much prefer to have saved many mountain climbers, because it makes me happiest to save a person's life." In the summer of 1969, Mikhail, along with a group of Soviet climbers, set out for the Italian Alps, making a series of difficult and spectacular climbs. For the most part, their trip was highly successful. Well, until they reached the final peak, the 2,951 meter high Mount Su Alto. The mountain is part of the Civetta group located in the eastern Dolomites and is one of the most impressive natural sights to behold. Civetta is considered one of the greatest alpine climbs, and it is nicknamed the Wall of Walls, more commonly known as the world-famous Northwest Wall. Almost all summits in this range require difficult and technical climbs, as the vertical expanse is well known for its dangerous rockfalls. Su Alto is a part of the Southwest Great Ridge, nicknamed the Magnificent Triad. After many successful summer summits already, Mikhail started his day on Su Alto with great enthusiasm and in excellent spirits. The beginning did not prove to be too difficult, as this was his second time climbing Su Alto, following the Gabriel Levanos route. He flew up the mountain with his known veracity and was nearing the top in no time. Towards the end of the climb, all he had left was to traverse a vertical section. For the final stretch, Mikhail was partnered with alpinist Vyacheslav Onishenko, who was given a belay from below on a ledge. A bend blocked Vyacheslav's view of Mikhail, which is not uncommon or unsafe in certain conditions, so he was not able to visibly observe what happened next. He heard a loud roar, the familiar sound of falling rocks. Vyacheslav prepared himself, expecting the inevitable pull of the rope, but it never came. Instead, the rope jerked, then went slack, and he heard a scream. The Georgian climber Mikhail fell 600 feet to his death. An unexpected rock struck Mikhail straight in the chest when he was about to finish his climb. He fell, but on his way down, a sharp rock severed the rope and would prove to be his ultimate demise. The accident devastated the mountaineering community. Poetry and folk songs were created in his honor, spreading information about the 37-year-old, claiming God had given him special gifts of discovering the innermost secrets to the mountains. Some say he could predict the weather, but in reality, he was an ordinary person, a person with his own daily worries and joys that cannot live without his mountains. Mikhail would later be buried in his home village of Mestia, where a museum now stands dedicated to him. In 1971, the Khergiani Rock Climbing Prize was established in the Soviet Union in his honor. Several peaks and routes have been named after him. For all climbers, both young and experienced, he was the standard of not only high skill, but also a person who was always ready to come to the aid of those in need, always ready to share everything he had.